American Families of Williamson County, Tennessee. Ms. Bell specializes in genealogical research as a means of promoting unity among a community and as a healing process to those whose families were split during slavery. This material has generated public awareness and appreciation of African American history. For Black History Month, February, the Williamson County Public Library Franklin sponsors an annual Thelma Bell Historic Photograph exhibit of African Americans of Williamson County. Ms. Bell has come to communities of Williamson County and surrounding counties to gather family photographs for these exhibits. Ms. Bell, a Franklin native, has devoted her life to capture the untold history and customs of her people in words and photographs. In fact, it is a passion. And she's a 1999 graduate of Leadership Franklin and a recipient of the prestigious Tennessee Historical Commission Award, and they received many other accolades and honors. All right. Her work in this field has awarded her a permanent plaque of recognition in the genealogy room of the Williamson County Library in Franklin. Ms. Bell currently lives here in Franklin. Okay. And then I will tell you about Ms. Jones. I'll let Ms. Bell talk, and then I'll talk about Ms. Williams when we introduce her. Okay, this time let's give a warm welcome to our Williamson County African American historian, Ms. Thelma Battle.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I was going to tell you a little something about myself, but I think Emma said enough.
Now, you. That's what I said.
First, I'd like to say a little prayer here. Heavenly Father, we'd like to thank you for allowing us to be here today. We'd like to thank you for helping us have a safe journey in this place. We hope that what will be given out here will enlighten some of you, enhance, and maybe help you embrace the African American culture. Heavenly Father, we're in a troubled world, and we ask you to help us to spread peace where there is no peace, and joy where there is no peace. Heavenly Father, I ask you to go with each and every one of us when we leave here, going about our way. In thy darling Son, Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Amen. Thank you. Amen.
I have tried to dedicate the past 25 years in maintaining the fullness of African American in Williamson County. Sometimes the history has been known as his story, which sometimes people think that is the white man's version of African American history. But history can be told by black and white as long as the facts and the truth be known.
Yes.
There was a time about 25 years ago, I was in Detroit, Michigan, visited my first cousin. She belonged to one of the largest churches in Detroit. It was called Hartford Missionary Baptist Church. She told of a presentation that was presented there one Sunday evening, and a young lady told a story on black history. It was how a slave owner had beaten a young black mother who was pregnant. But the cruelty of it, he had other slaves to dig a hole, to dig a pit, to lay her belly in that pit in order that the child might be harmed. And they beat her. And people were asking questions. and trying to see, are you telling the truth? How do you know? And that lady said, I am a descendant of the woman whose belly laid in the pit. And she told me there was such an uproar in that church you would not believe. I am here to tell the stories, to maintain the fullness of African American history in any way possible that I'm able to. God gives all of us a talent. Everybody does not have the same talent, but we are expected to use that talent for the service and fullness of others as well as our family and ourselves. I have spent a lot of time writing stories, and I have a poem that someone had written. It's an unknown author, and it kind of sizes up what all of this is about. People who know nothing or care nothing about their past are not likely to carry much vision and hope for the future. We must understand that although our African American history is full of individual stories of hatred and abuse, the human spirit is victorious. The African American population here in this county has been here ever since probably in the early 1800s. They were brought here by their slave owners, and at times they outnumbered the whites that were here. I have collected stories from all over Williamson County trying to showcase the resilience and the strength and not only the letdowns but the upbeats of our people, African Americans. I have gone from Thompson Station to College Grove. I have gone to Brentwood, the Hardscopel area, all over the county, duplex, trying to get the true history from as many people that I could. I have a book here that I wrote many years ago. It's called We Ran Until Who Lasted the Longest. This lady on here is a cousin, a distant cousin of mine. And she personally told me that when she was a young girl, she and her sister was out walking and a black snake got after them. And she said, girl, you know, we ran until who lasted the longest. She said we got to this was in Brentwood on the Crockett Road. She said we got to the Hope plantation, whatever, the gate, and another cousin had an axe where he was doing some work out there, and they hollered for him, but they had escaped that snake. And so that's the story and the reasoning for the title, We Ran Until Who Lasted the Longest. And her father has a story in here. And her father was Eugene Holt. And they lived on the Liberty Church Road in Brentwood that was off of Concord Road, but two country western singers bought property over there and had the road closed up. So you couldn't go through it anymore. It was a dead end. But they also owned property there. They had been owning their property there for well over 100 years. Now, her father told me this story. If you all don't mind listening to a couple of stories, I just want to explain what the black people experienced and what they were up against and how they were able to move ahead. Now, her father was Eugene Holt. She says, now this happened several times, many years ago, to my father, Eugene Holt. He worked for a white man named Hugh Edmondson. Now, if any of you are historians, you have heard of the Edmondson plantation and the Edmondson slave owners. Now, this happened several times, many years ago, to my father, Eugene Holt Sr. He worked for a white man named Hugh Edmondson. He worked from sun up to sundown, doing what they call cropping. But he also milked cows there too. When he would return home in the late evenings, he said the road sounded like it would be full of a herd of horses. He could hear them horses, but he couldn't see them. He said he just had to buckle his nerves up. In other words, brace himself and go on and head home. Because there wasn't no use back then of being scared. Isn't that something? He could just hear them horses coming behind him, going plop-a-lock, plop-a-lock. Them horses would follow him all the way to the porch. When he stepped up on the porch, them horses would leave. He would be rain wet from sweat, but he had to come home. Mr. Hugh Edmondson lived there where that golf course, the Governor's Club, is now. Wow. We was living on Liberty Church Road then. Now, a lady that told me that was named Laura Pearl Christmas, and she's been dead many years. But I thank God that I was able to talk to her and visit her because I had grown up around her. She was much older than me, but she was related to me. It's those kind of stories that help maintain the fullness of African American history. I have one other story told by Mr. Fred Williams, and he was the team captain of the football team back in 1941, but he graduated in 1944. And this is what he told me. As a right tackle, I remember when we went down to Columbia on Carver Smith's homecoming game in 1943. Now, Carver Smith was a segregated only high school in Columbia, black high school, and it too was segregated like the one in Franklin. He says, all the way down there, my teammates were singing the fight song. We're gonna roll the football on. We was all hyped up. The Columbia team was mad because we were late arriving. We had to change clothes on the bus and go directly to the field. After the first quarter, we were beating Columbia 6-0. We beat Columbia that year. After the game, we got word that Columbia's team was going to beat us up. we were able to catch a ride with Mr. Arch Kennedy straight from the field back to Franklin. We didn't even take a shower. Now, Mr. Arch Kennedy is Alma Massimo's grandfather. So I was told he always traveled with that everywhere the team went, he went. And so I've got one other football story I'd like to share because we've got another relative in the house. And this was from James William Moore, FPS class of 1960. He says there was always a very intense rivalry between the two football teams. There might have been pushing and shoving during those games, but I never saw anyone fight. One incident I remember in specific was when we were at Carver Smith. after the game, they were not going to let us get on the bus. In other words, they wanted to fight. When I played from 1956 to 1960, the Panthers only lost to Carver Smith twice. Some of the better players from Carver Smith were Pete Crawford, Walter Webster, Stocky Webster, and Charlie Jones. Now we have Lamar Turner in the back, and James Wickton Moore was his uncle. There is so much to tell about the history. This is another book that I have written. I interviewed several people who had raised hogs in Williamson County, meaning some of them raised hogs in the city because there was no zoning ordinance back there to keep them from being able to do so. And these people told me in detail the who, what, when, and why. And I thought maybe that because they had raised hogs and ate so much hog meat that it might have caused them to have high blood pressure. And so I took a survey with the people in this book. And some of them said they didn't think so, and some of them said yes. But one in particular said he had high blood pressure, but when he divorced his wife, he did not have it anymore. And if any of you all remember Fred Haddix, he is also in this book. Fred Haddix had a farm out on Coleman Road where he raised hogs and packaged his own meat, and he had bottled water. But he gave up eating pork meat and raising hogs and turned into a vegetarian. But he too has deceased, and I was blessed to have gotten his story to go in this book. Now this is volume 1 of Natchez Street, where I did the history of Natchez Street from its early beginning up until the present time. The man on the cover, Mr. Arch Kennedy, he was a street vendor who sold vegetables, and he was all over the neighborhood. I know in the black community and possibly in the white community too. And he would sing, "Ladies and gentlemen, get your pots in your hand, because here by golly come the turnip grain man." And what happened, his grandson ended up being conned with that phase by, I guess, the friends who knew the grandfather with the horse in the cart. And so they started calling his grandson Turnip Green. And Turnip Green is also deceased, and he was Hammer McLeod's brother. Now, volume 2 explains the history of A.N.C. Williams, who was the merchant on Main Street during the 1860s after the Civil War. In this book is also the Crutcher family, which Miss Narcissus Cheatham over there has descended from. So there's so many stories about the county. In this book, I told about the black people who were maids and how they were able to make a way out of no way with the little money that they were making, and how they would, a group of them that had to work elsewhere. There was an interurban bus that allowed them to be able to ride to Hillsborough Road or Franklin Road to work, doing day work. And because we had a Franklin interurban at that time. But In another one of these books, it tells how people were able to stay on place. That's a saying in the black community, meaning that you were made a cook for a white family, but you didn't go home every day. You stayed during the week, and you went home on the weekends. It's such a rich history here in Williamson County, and every day it seems that we're losing a piece of our heritage. So many buildings have been allowed to be torn down, and I'm so thankful that the ones that have been saved, and the African American Heritage Society, under the leadership of Alma McLemore, was able to save one huge victory of house on Natchez Street belonging to Mr. A and C. Williams' family. I hope that what I have said has done a little enlightening. And if any of you have any questions, I don't know if my 30 minutes are up or not, but I think I've said what I wanted to say.
But since we have this great audience, if you don't mind, I know you have your next book coming up. Would you tell some of the people who don't know about Natchez and all the things that, the buildings and things that were there, years ago? I think that is some awesome history.
Okay. Years ago, before the slum clearance came in the 1960s, late 1960s, there was a skating rink there in the 1940s. And after that, there was a movie theater on Natchez Street. Can you imagine? It was a pocketed community, but black people were able to live in their own world within a city all around them that was not as accepting but black people had about 3 grocery stores in the Natchez area. They had funeral homes. It was at least 3 or 4 funeral homes in that Natchez area. There were restaurants. I mean, up until maybe the 70s, if you wanted a meet and greet, it wasn't just black people patrons, they were white too. The local sheriff would always be there at lunchtime with some of the deputies. It was something to see. The Natchez Street area, a lot of people have likened it to what Jefferson Street once was to Natchez. Natchez Street was booming. It was the place to be. And plus there were nightclubs. There were bands that would be booked from out of town. I was told Fats Domino played on Natchez Street. He also played at the place called the Morning Star over where the Sonic is now on Fifth Avenue. We have so much to tell. I have 2 books coming out. One is on the founders of the school that was once on Natchez Street. J.K. Hughes, he was principal. Well, not necessarily founder, but principal, but Willis Claiborne was the founder of Claiborne Institute. It was also on the site where Claiborne Hughes is now. And the other 3rd person that's the topic of that book is Mrs. Ruth Gaylor, who opened her home during segregated times to weary black travelers who could not stop at a hotel or get gas or anywhere because that's the way the times were. And so she had a place at her home for people to stay in. She was listed in the Green Book. The Green Book was a directory for black people going north or south to know where it was safe to stop. A movie came out not too long ago on the Green Book. And if you all haven't seen it, I suggest you see the movie The Green Book. So, thank you. Okay.
So I've got your first book, Who Ran the Fastest, which is really good. And I think I got it at the Heritage Foundation years ago.
So,
But
yeah.
where can you get the rest of your books? At the Heritage Foundation?
This one is at the Hoghead Cheese, Chitlins and Pluck. It's at the Heritage Foundation. And Natural Street Revisited, Volume 1 and Volume 2 can be purchased at the Heritage Foundation.
Ms. Sullivan, we have all your books at the Heritage Foundation.
Thank you.
I thought so, yeah. Okay. Good.
I would like to thank Rachel. They have helped me. And it's so sweet. I'd like to thank Brad Shields, and Rachel and Marcia, who represent 3 organizations that have supported me and my work and helped me along the way. It's not, sometimes it takes a community of a collective effort from a community to make things happen.
Yes,
And I am so grateful that that's what Franklin is about.
yes.
I embrace Franklin. It is a place I love. People ask me what I want to live in and raise. Nope.
Amen.
This is it. But thank you all so much.
Thank you so much. Mr. Brown. I'm telling you, when you get those books, you won't want to put down. And some of the people here remember the stuff that she talks about, because the barbershops and all those places, and it's just amazing. And you just are a treasure. There is no other African American in Livingston County who has done the research that she's done. She spent her entire life doing this, and she's still doing it. And we really, really need to give her all the accolades we can and show appreciation. Let's give her one more big hand. For the sake of time, Joanne, would you like for me to read this, or you just want to share? 'Cause I like for you to share in your own words. I know you've got a lot to talk about. I can read a little bit.
No,
Yeah, okay.
I will do that.
I met Joanne a few years ago, and it's been a joy and a pleasure as well. And she'll tell you about herself, but she's an amazing lady in Murray County. And Murray County is our neighbor, so that's why we're doing this together. The African American Heritage Society of Livingston County, the African American Heritage Society of Murray County. We're neighbors, we're friends, we love each other, and we're a community. So at this time, without any further ado, I will like to welcome and introduce Joanne McClellan, Murray County historian. The first, I'll let her tell you that today.
Thank you, Alma. And I must say that when I decided to start the African American Heritage Society back in 2012, Selma probably won't remember, but I called her and I got advice from her, and she told me about how you guys started your organization. So we started in 2012, and then 5 years later, I talked to the Rutherford County people, and then they started one in like 2006 or so. So we have this thing going, so we need to get them in other counties. But my journey in history has been really different. I spent 30 years as an IT professional. I was a director of an IT organization. I retired, spent 2 years between Murray County, my home, and Dallas building a house. And in the meantime, I was bored and I needed something to do, so I went to the Fort Worth archives to research my genealogy. And I started researching my family and couldn't find very much, although there was this connection between Tennessee and Texas. taxes, couldn't find very much. So I came back here, and they had just maybe 2 years earlier started the Murray County Archives. So I'm down in the archives, and I'm looking for the name of my great-great-grandmother. And, you know, they didn't have any records, and I said, okay. And then this one archivist said to me, you know what, in the 60s and the 80s, we had 2 great historians that published Maury County Cemetery transcription books.
Wow.
And I said, okay, great, maybe I'll find my grandmother there, because, you know, we didn't have death records in Tennessee until like 1908. And she died, I found that she was on the 1870 census, but not on the 1880 census, so she died between 1870 and 1880, so I'm looking for her. So I went through these Maury County Cemetery transcription books. They did not have any African American cemeteries. They decided not to include African American cemeteries, although there were some African Americans transcribed there, but they were African Americans who were buried in white cemeteries, like my great-great-grandmother Violet, who is in a cemetery not too far from where I currently live. So with that, I got involved with the Murray County Genealogical Society. I was vice president for 2 years, and I was president for 4 years. And when I was president, I decided that it was time for the African American cemeteries to be transcribed. And 4 years later, it was 2004, 2009, 4 years later, I published a transcription of all of the African American cemeteries in Murray County. Now, there are only 75 real transcriptions, because a lot of the, we didn't have death records. So what I did was, and a lot of the African Americans did not have headstones. So what I did was, I spent months at the Murray County Archives reading every single death record of every single African American that died or buried in Murray County from 1908 to 1930, and all of those transcriptions are included in this book. And in doing that, I found that there are cemeteries that I don't have, that I didn't find, and there may be about 50 of those. And then there were, the cemetery listed was in that field, it was Murray County, or Mount Pleasant, or Columbia, or Curleopa, not a specific cemetery. So that was my introduction to history. And then, and I thought, where's the rest of our history? And, you know, our history is rich, and the African American history is a part of American history. Yes. And we are part of what made this country great. Yes. So I think that, and I was thinking that the rest of that story has to be told. And Maury County, my home of course, but I think it's still sort of unique. So this is when I started the African American Heritage Society. We are now 10 years old, thanks to the advice from Thelma. We're now 10 years old, and we do a lot of things. The very first major project that we did, and a lot of this came from my genealogy, I found out that my great uncle was Civil War. He was wounded in the Battle of Nashville. So that got me interested in the Civil War soldiers and the African Americans that served with the colored troops. So one of the first projects that we did was to research the names of the African Americans from Maury County that fought in the Civil War, and we were putting up a memorial. There was a little bit of a, I don't want to say controversy, but there was a memorial that was already there, but it only included the Confederate soldiers. So I had this name of 54 black men and 4 white men that fought for the Union. I went to the county and I said to them, we want to put their names on this war memorial right beside the Confederate soldiers. And lo and behold, they allowed us to do it. Then, a few years later, I found 30 more names, and we added those right below the first 58. And then now I have 20 more that I have found that I'm going to go to the county and get permission to add those names to the War Memorial. If you've been to Murray County, I can't remember whether it's the north, east, southwest side of the courthouse, there's this huge memorial that has all of these soldiers that died during the war, from the Civil War through Vietnam. And the colored troops nor the Union soldiers, federal soldiers, were not listed. So we listed those, and this was in 2016, I think, long time. The other thing that we did to go along with some of our research, we started a lecture series. So we've had a lecture series going for almost 10 years. And the first guy who came down to speak to us was one of Franklin's own, Eric Jacobson.
Okay.
We were doing this series on the Civil War, so we had Eric to come down and speak to the organization. So since then, we've done the lecture series, and we've gone from the Civil War to like any and everything.
Right.
The other thing that we do along with the lecture series, we do history calendars. So we didn't do a history calendar for the first series, but we started doing history calendars, and that's our way of sharing the African American history of Murray County to the rest of the community. We use them, I do the research, and we use these calendars as a source of income to support the society. The first calendar we did was on the Rosenwald schools. And I know you guys are working on your Rosenwald school. Murray County had 15 that I have found, Rosenwald schools. I attended one. And so did my mother. And you're saving your Rosenwald school. I cried in 2006 when the county decided to tear mine down. It was a two-teacher school. They tore it down. And it's, I don't know how many of you are familiar with the little theater community. My mom recently passed. She lived within spitting distance of that school. So we're sitting on the front porch looking at the school. Now we sit on the front porch and look at a big old blue water tower. But they tore down that school, and it was listed as one of the best Rosenwald schools in the county in 1927. I do a lot of research on schools because I think the legacy in Murray County is education, and you'll probably see why if I have time to talk about it. The next calendar we did, still continuing the research with the churches, the African American churches. This is a calendar that includes African American churches that were, at the time that we did this in 2016, at least 100 years old. And we have churches that date back to 1838. And we were able to, and some of these churches still exist. At least 10 are still active churches. So we did this, and we talked about the involvement of people from Murray County that started denominations, just like the Primitive Baptist with Williamson, and just like the Original Church of God with Minister Gray. So that's talked about here. The other thing that we did in the calendars, there were so many institutions, like you talked about with the funeral homes, the barbershops, are people that made a way for themselves. In Murray County in 1850, a lot of black businesses were on the square. And you know, with the changes in the laws, the Plessy versus Ferguson ruling, the African American businesses started moving to an area called the Bottom. So that's where our African American business district is now. But they were up on the square. So this is a calendar that talks about those African American owned businesses that made a way for themselves. We had the Morton Funeral Home, for example. There's a Roundtree Ogilvy Funeral Home here. But the Morton Funeral Home started in 1891. And those people, those women kept that funeral home going. The women kept the funeral home going. Kept the funeral home going for like 3 generations. The other calendar that we did dealt with, which I dearly love, activists and politicians. You know, we started having people elected to the they call it the Board of Mayor and Alderman in the 1880s in Maury County. So this calendar features everyone that was elected to the Board of Aldermen, Mayor, Board of Aldermen, County Commissioners, City Council, and it goes up to the current at the time, which includes people that I knew because we took it from the beginning to the current day, and which was interesting, understanding the history and understanding the people that came before us. And in Maury County, which I think is really interesting, is that one person that I knew very well, Maury County ended up naming a building after him because he was the first African American that served on the commission, I think, yeah. So that was really good. And then the next one we did, which I think we all would love, most of us would love, women of Maury County. These are the women of Maury County, past and present, that made a difference in the community. And we did this to showcase the women's suffrage in 2020. And in addition to like the teachers, like my school teacher from the theater community, we have people who are currently playwrights, people who are currently founded schools, people who are currently artists, people who was, in fact, the Mrs. Ogilvy of the Roundtree Ogilvy Gilmore, she's on here because she started one of the first daycare centers in Columbia, and the lady who started the first Girl Scout troop in Columbia. These are the women that made a difference in the county, and we're featuring them in the 2020. Now, our most popular calendar was this one, the World of Sports. And it takes you back to the Negro League. And
I gotta talk to you.
it takes you back to the Negro League. And then, of course, we had players from here. And then we ended up having a guy from here who ended up being the head of the Tennessee Sports, whatever it is. His name was Childress, who came out of Maury County. So this also takes you back from where we started, or where I could find the original, up to the current. And we featured some current players, high school players that went pro. There are several high school players that went pro for Maury County. There's one named, and I'm not into sports, Shaq Mason or whatever. He's a professional player now.
Union Patriots?
Huh?
The president.
Yes, Shaq Mason. He's playing with the New England Patriots right now. Yes, he's from Maury County. And then a guy named Pye, John Pointer. And then what's my hero is a lady named Betty Booker Parks, who was she played for the women's professional sports. And now she's a principal over a high school, I think it's in Memphis. But then the thing that we did this year, we wanted to look at where we are now, what people are doing. So we did a calendar that featured doctors and lawyers. And in this calendar from doctors and lawyers, it went from the early, like 1900 to now. So in the 1900s, we had a guy who was a doctor who was a World War II veteran. And then we had a guy who, from Maury County, a lawyer who ended up being an assistant attorney general in Illinois. And then we had my old high school sweetheart, who was a federal judge. And then we ended up, and what's neat about this calendar is that if you look at the front cover, it talks about the high schools that they attended. You know, Carter Smith, I went to Carter Smith. They attended Carter Smith, they attended College Hill, which was the first public black school for Maury County, and then Clark Training, and then Central High, which after integration, Central High, and then Mount Pleasant, and then Zion Christian Academy, which is like a private, like a private school. And this year, we're also doing a lecture series, and our last lecture series will be in October. And we're having a young woman to come and speak who is a lawyer that graduated in Maury County, who is a lawyer, and she's practicing, I think, down in the Memphis area. So we're trying to showcase the history, and we're trying to show that we are still making history. We're still making contributions to this great nation of ours. So the other thing that, you know, I, like Thelma, have not written a book. I started a book. It got so big, and then I tried to break it up into 4 parts, and then it got even larger. And then what I've also done is to we had a traveling exhibit that was at your library a couple of years ago. This first traveling exhibit that we did was called The Path to Freedom, and it talks about the education being the path to freedom, starting from right after the Civil War through, I think, the 90s. And that exhibit was on the road for 280 days when we first released it. Then, of course, COVID hit. Right now, because of COVID, we applied for they call it a community outreach grant. And with that grant, we did a website, and we also are doing another traveling exhibit, and this traveling exhibit will be available in November, and it's focusing strictly on the title is Education in Murray County, the African American Experience. So it's talking about the successes, the struggles, or whatever of the African Americans in Murray County from the Jim Crow through desegregation, and I think it's going to be a wonderful exhibit. The one thing that I am most proud of that I didn't mention yet was our historical markers. In the 10 years, we have done 5 historical markers, and if you're familiar with the Tennessee historical markers, you have to do all this work, research, then get them approved by the state. The state has a 22-person board that approves all the historical markers. So we have 5 historical markers that have been approved and that are standing. The first one was for College Hill, the first public school. The second was for the Murray County Colored Hospital. Did you know that we had a hospital down there that operated for 30 years? Nobody else did either until we started. You know, they just sort of forgot about that bit of history. We had a Murray County Colored Hospital that operated for 30 years. They had no place to go except to Hubbard in Nashville, so we had this hospital operating for 30 years. And then the other marker was for the A.J. Morton Funeral Home. And then we had one for the Freedmen Bureau of Savings and Trust Bank. Are you familiar with the Freedmen Banks? The Freedmen Banks? So we had one down in Murray County. So we have a historical marker. It was like right down on the square. So we had a historical marker for that also. And then the last one that we did is probably one of my favorite. And it's for a man. The first one we've done for an individual. His name was Edmund Kelly. He has a wonderful story. I found information about him during the Lincoln Papers in the Library of Congress, and also a lot of other nationally known databases. But what Edmund Kelly did was, the biggest thing is that he paid boys with candy to teach him to read. And he was working at a little boys' school in Columbia, so he paid them with candy to teach him to read and write. So he ended up staying in Murray County for a while. He co-founded one of the oldest churches, Mount Lebanon, which was founded in 1843. He left because his owner was having financial difficulties, so she gave him permission to leave Murray County, but for that privilege, he sent her back $10 a month. So he ended up going to New Bedford, Massachusetts. He was involved with the American Baptist Convention, and when he was involved with that organization, he visited with Abraham Lincoln and also Andrew Johnson. Lincoln gave him permission to minister to this was 1863, to minister to the slaves that were behind the Union lines. But he never stopped there. He published Sunday school materials before Boyd Publishing Company in Nashville. There was one document, I call them position papers, one document that he wrote that was in 1876 when, we didn't have there was not much of an education system or not much support for a public education system. And then we went into this separate but equal thing. He said, since the order of the day is separate, get these schools up wherever you can, whenever you can. And he said, I know that the buildings are gonna be bad and the books are gonna be old, but you can succeed, you can make progress, you can educate your children. That it was his son that, while he's waiting to go to law school, decided to come back from New Bedford to visit his cousins here in Murray County. He is the one that started the first public school in Murray County, and that whole legacy just continued, you know. And I am in touch with his great grandson, who is also doing research, and we share information that we have found about his line, his genealogy. So, but the Murray County African American Heritage Society is trying to tell the rest of the story. A lot of us talk about a lot of the atrocities, and a lot of us talk about things that are so negative. But if you look, and I told someone this the other day, and they looked at me like I was losing it. I said, if you look at the African American history timeline, and you put everything down, our successes outweigh our failures. You know, we have contributed so much to the greatness of this country that it outweighs all of the negatives. And this is what I like to tell my grandchildren. I have two. This is what I like to tell my grandchildren. Look at what was accomplished with less. You don't have an excuse for not making it. you don't have an excuse for not making it. You know, and just look at what these people accomplished over these years. You just don't have an excuse for failure. And grandma ain't gonna like me. ain't gonna like granny. One thing that is, you know, like Franklin, we don't have a museum yet, and we're working on it, and we'll get there one day. But we have been selected to host a Smithsonian exhibit. So next year, the African American Heritage Society will be hosting an exhibit from the Smithsonian. It's one of their traveling exhibits, and we're going to have it for 6 weeks. And I will certainly make sure that all of you know where it's going to be. We're working out the details of that, but we're really excited. The name of the exhibit is Voices and Votes: Democracy in America, and we're really excited about being able to do that. And they contacted us, you know, and they said, of course we will, you know. And I don't know how long they've been doing this, but I do know my colleagues over in Dixon County hosted one a few years ago called Crossroads. So we're really, really excited about that. But our whole mission is just telling the rest of our story. It's just so many. Now we're working on an oral history project with the Abermore Library at MTSU, and I have submitted names of individuals for them to interview, but we haven't started an oral history project like Velma did with interviewing people, but I'm hoping that with the people that they interview as a part of this project, we will have access to that. The other project that we did with MTSU, which is still trying to tell the rest of our story, is I worked on this project for 3 years via Zoom with MTSU, and what we basically did was, it was called Places and Perspectives, and what we really did was pinpointed all of the African American communities in Murray County from 1860 to 1920, schools and churches and businesses, trying to visualize the landscape from that period. And of course, coming from a very rural community, I made sure that all the cemeteries and all the churches up in my little community were actually there. But we got over 100 or 150 documents that prove that these communities existed. And back in 1914, and we, you know, as like a guide, and based on some of the research that I had done previously, 1914, there were 42 African American schools in Murray County, and this was before Rosenwald. And there were these schools, church, multi-purpose type buildings, and we used that as a base to try to pinpoint where these communities were, and we also found the people that contributed to building these communities, and which was a wonderful project. And this information is going to be stored digitally at the MTSU Walker Library, and it's going to be available to the public, I hope. But this is just one way that we're still trying to keep the history alive in Murray County. Because, you know, when you go down there and look at the books that the other historians have written, it's just not there. I forgot to mention, as a part of my story, 2 years ago, I was appointed the county historian. So I am the first African-American historian in the state of Tennessee. And I do get involved in other projects. I recently scheduled a meeting with someone at the state, because, you know, like Williamson County, Murray County is growing, and they're growing these little subdivisions and whatever in our countryside. Right. So I had to have a person from the state to come down and talk to the public about these cemetery laws. You know, and what he did exactly what I wanted him to do. He defined what a cemetery was: a person buried in this ground. You know, one, it didn't have to be 100, one. He defined that, and he also went through the laws, you know, the felonies. You know, if you go in and you try to destroy a cemetery, it is a Class A or Class B felony. You know, so he explained all of that, and I've also talked to other organizations about the cemetery laws, because we really need to protect that history. Because they're like what Thelma has found, I've found stories of people buried in cemeteries, and it's nowhere else until you try to piece it together. And one example, then I'll sit down, one example is this one woman who taught at a Freedom Bureau school in Murray County. And she's buried in Spring Hill, and you can't find very much about her, but she couldn't read and write in 1865. 1869, she was assigned to teach at a Freedom Bureau school in Mount Pleasant. And in the school records, if you go to TSLA, you see a lot of Freedom Bureau school records. She said she was writing this report to I think the supervisor in Nashville, and she was saying, please forgive all mistakes, because 3 years ago, I could neither read nor use this pen. So it was just this was like a wonderful story. And then I found out that she did continue her education, and she graduated from Central Tennessee College, and she's buried in the Spring Hill Cemetery. You know, so that's like a wonderful story. One of the stories that I'll have to include when I do my book. But anyway, thank you, Alma, for inviting me, and thank you guys for listening. Okay.
Questions, and Joanne is went through a lot of different things. If you have a couple, if not, do y'all have any questions?
I have a question for Delma. By chance, did you come across the Watson family in Princeton?
The Watson family from Davidson County, Edmondson, Pike, Mount Pisgah area.
Okay, one of the descendants went to Fisk, taught at Wiley College in Texas, which was my school. He was one of the great debaters, and there's the movie. So if you have not seen it, see the movie, The Great Debaters.
Oh, okay. Wow. I think I've seen that.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness, has this not been awesome, y'all?
I was going to ask, are your calendars and those books, are they able to be purchased?
The book, I don't have anymore. It's been out of print I've been out of stock rather for a few years. I don't have any more of that. This is my only copy. These calendars, I think I have some of, and I don't have the complete set, but I have some of the 2018 and some of the 2022, and maybe a few of the others.
Are they down in Columbia or wherever?
Right now, you know, we don't have a building, and right now you can, if you want to like drive down to the Murray County Archives, I can have them hold some for you, or I could meet you someplace, whatever. But, if you want to go down to Murray County Archives, I can certainly drop off something for you, okay? Okay. And just call them and let them know, and they'll tell me that's my non-office office, okay? Yes?
Congratulations on the markers.
Thank you.
2 questions. 1, what type of markers are they? And also 2, would the markers be any different if they didn't have to go through that state approval process?
Well, the text would not be any different. The reason that we opted to go with the official Tennessee Commission markers is because they're protected. They're under their umbrella. If someone wants to tear one down, they'll replace it. These markers are, right now, they're like $2,300 a pop, not including all the time you have to spend doing the research, but we opted to do that just because they're protected under the Tennessee laws, and it's to me, it's prestigious, I guess is a good word, to have an official Tennessee marker that has been, the marker description has been reviewed and approved by 22 people across the state. So to me, it's like a prestigious thing, okay?
Where is the Murray County Hospital marker?
The Murray County Hospital marker is on East 7th Street in Columbia. If you're familiar with Columbia, and if you're going out of downtown, go up and past the Ryan Funeral Home, it's up there on that hill. Okay. Yes?
What was the person's name that was the educator that was buried in Spring Hill Cemetery? And where is that cemetery?
Her name is Anna Bond Pickett. That's her married name. And that cemetery is on, what's that street? Macklemore? Is it Macklemore? Is Macklemore Street? I think that is. If you go in, is it Macklemore Street?
Right in the center of Spring Hill.
Is it right in the center of Spring Hill? It's right at that line you turn, if you're coming south, you turn left, and it's right down there. And there's a black cemetery on one side and the white cemetery on the other side. It's Macklemore, yeah. Thank you. There any other questions?
Yes, I
Yes.
have a question. Hello. The Morton Funeral Home that you mentioned, you said you got a state marker for that one?
Is it Tennessee official?
Great, that's
Yeah.
wonderful. And I wanted to ask about the race riot from
Okay.
1946.
Yeah, the Columbia Race Riot was one of the sites of the race riot. That's where a lot of the activity took place, was at the Morton Funeral Home. Yes, and on the one side of the marker, it talks about the Columbia Race Riot. I call it the Columbia Uprising. It really was a race riot. But on the one side of the marker, 2 sides. One side talks about the Columbia Race Riot, and the other side talks about the Morton Funeral Home. And it's right in the front of the building on that property.
So that's fantastic. Miss Battle, I wanted to say for Miss Battle, the book that she wrote about Nashua Street gives a lot of the history of the black businesses that were located there, and I have found those to be very, very helpful in researching the Patton Brothers Funeral Home, which has a rich history here. It started, of course, in Franklin, and nowhere else was I able to find the original brothers' names who founded the funeral home. Of course, Reverend J.T. Patton was the initial founder, and then there were 2 brothers that joined along, and nowhere else was I able to find that except in your book, The Nashua Street Revisited.
One thing I wanted to add, this is probably, I don't know whether it's unique or not, but our Black Business District was placed on the National Registry in 1982. So if you're looking at there are like 13 businesses on the National Registry from South Main Street to Woodland. They're all African American owned, and that is what was the Black Commercial District, and was on the National Registry, placed on the National Registry in 1982.
Y'all, there is so much. I'm telling you, we're so behind. I mean, that's why we have to embrace one another. The different counties, like Dixon has a lot. There's so much, and Thelma and Joanne could talk all day about things because seriously, just like the Smithsonian, Thelma can tell you that, and they're looking at us, you all, the country, they're looking at us, the Smithsonian Institute, to call Murray County, to call Thelma, Madeline, Pearl Bransford and say, we want to come down here, and they did an exhibit back
the traveling food across America. The Smithsonian came because we filled out an essay and we were selected. We weren't actually asked like you all. The counties had to send in essays, and so we represented Tennessee.
That's awesome.
The middle Tennessee, Pearl Bransford and myself at the Natchez Place.
That's fantastic.
And it was an honor, and the Smithsonian stayed 6 weeks.
Yeah.
And they had to be in a secure place that was locked up because the exhibit came in trailer trucks. So the library was able to keep it secure and locked. And that's how we were able to get it. But the essay was fish, chitlins, and barbecue. You had to write about the food of your area. Now the Carlton Plantation and the Carter House had sent in essays as well, but most people were talking about corn and stuff like that. So I said, we need to do something catchy like chitlins. So we did chitlins and barbecue, and that got their attention, and we were selected. And I'd like to add that this is a 2010 poster from a library exhibit that I did several years ago, and this lady is showing, this is part of our African American culture, a spillover of women being able to carry a bucket or a basket on their heads and have something in both hands and walk without spilling it. That was part of the culture carried over from Africa. So Marcia from the special collections at the library ran off some copies. I have several copies if you all would like to take one home. And this is a 2010 exhibit. It was called A Tough Road to Hope. And the lady is Miss Ella Presley Dotson.
With that, like I said, there's so much, and Joanne was telling me, somebody else, I'm sorry, go ahead.
This isn't a question, but it's just a comment, and I just want to say, because I know both of you ladies, and this has just been really great, because I'm a transplant from California, and so I moved to Franklin, Tennessee. But it's really wonderful because I bought just about all of your books because I had no idea how rich the history was here. So I think everybody that's relocating here definitely need to be involved in these porch talks and then to find out what's happening in the community that they live in.
Thank you, thank you.
And I just have a comment also to give kudos to Thelma because she did all the research, her and Tina, to find my ancestor who is now on a marker in downtown Franklin who represents one of the U.S. Colored Troop. I'm the great-great-granddaughter of James Moore, and his marker is right there by the Colored Troop. And also Alma, that's how we got to find out that we're kin because the Moore married the Chairs, and that's where I come in. But then one of the children was one of the Moore children married an Alexander, and that's how we found out that we're cousins. So it's our history. So it's been very, very interesting. And I wondered why, when we were little, that picture that was on the banners, James Moore, was all downtown Franklin, was always on my grandfather and my grandmother's wall in their living room. But we, you know, I didn't know as a kid who that was. And then, you know, when you started researching with my mom, and then I found out, yeah, he's really good, close kin.
That's amazing. He's on my family tree. He's on my daddy's side.
He starts mine. He starts mine.
Yeah.
And then my grandfather's parents, his mother was one of the children of James Moore. And then she married the Chairs. Minerva Moore married William Chairs. And that's how the Chairs linkage got into James Moore.
Do your research, folks, because you don't ever know who you get to.
That's right. That is so true.
calendar. I thought, that is so cool. I said, girl, we may have to copy you. But we do, at our black tie, we have a booklet that we produce that has, we have a pioneer family that we select every year. We're in our 20th year. So you all about 18 years behind who haven't been following us. So you can follow us on our website and all that, and Twitter. You know, they say follow us on Twitter. I'm not on Twitter, so I don't know if y'all can follow them, whatever. But it just to get caught up, the things that they're talking about is so much, and you will enjoy it, and you will know some of these people, and if not, you'll be so eager to learn more and more and more. But we still may have to do that calendar thing. So you won't get upset if we talk about it. Because you can also recognize.
Great idea.
Yeah, we can also recognize more people. Like in the black tie we have, like I said, we have the pioneer family. Thelma has been instrumental in selecting. She's done the research on the families and amazing stories. You know, the Hope family in Brentwood. You all know where Witherspoon is. Crockett Road, the Hope family, the enslaved, and Rachel has been part of that. You know, that family, we have descendants here right now. Pat Scruggs around the corner. She's a descendant of, and Johnny, she's a descendant of her ancestors, her enslaved ancestors were at Crockett, right? And also the Gosey family, Thelma's family, the Gosey family. We had kids that were playing ball a few years ago together. They were playing baseball, and their parents got to talking. And one was a slave descendants, a slave ancestor, slave owners descendant, and the other was a slave descendant. And those kids were playing ball together. So we ended up talking about the Gosey story. And that day at the black tie, the two little boys got up, and there were tears all over them. The two little boys think about that, how deep that is, y'all. Those are the things that bring us together. And as we learn this history, we don't have to be afraid to talk about it. I wasn't there, you weren't there back then. What we do today determines how we can move forward, progress, and share the stories together in a way that those mistakes won't be made, and that we can use the love of God in all of this.
Amen.
So we just are so grateful for everybody. We could be here another hour or two, but it's been awesome. And our Murray County partner, we're grateful. We're grateful for both of y'all, and thank you all. And our little thing was for keeping history alive. You're doing it. So we just keep hope and pray that we will continue to hear more stories, and that we will have more people involved who want to tell their stories, because we're going to have the 264 Natchez Project. We'll have people that have been here for many years that will be sharing their stories. I see many of you in the audience, Thelma, Johnny, Nancy, Annette, all of y'all, Donnell, Sue, these are people that are born and raised here. They got so much to share. And if I left somebody's name out, Harvey, y'all please forgive me. You know how it is. You start calling names, then you leave somebody out and they say, "You didn't call my name." You're a native, you just holler out. But thank y'all again for coming, and next month, and I think we'll still, I don't know, it'll be nice. Well, I don't know if but I kind of like this setting. The American Legion is so great for us, and Donnell and Harvey, we appreciate you all. We appreciate Donald for coming and doing the video today. And is it Donald?
Yes, Donald.
Yeah, so we'll probably have these stories. We'll have something to share later to 264 Natchez and with the community. So each day is a day of history. We're celebrating. We appreciate everybody. And I gotta say one more thing. This evening, if you're in Franklin, we have First Fridays now. Every first Friday, like you have the art calls downtown, but we're over at the McElroy House. We have Mobile Barbecue and Fish House food, and we have music by DJ Train, and then we have, you can go into the museum for a free tour. It won't be an abbreviated, it'll be just a very short abbreviated tour so that you can come back and hear the real story by Harvey and others. And then we'll have, also this time, we'll have in honor and memory of Joseph Bibb, his artwork. He was a great artist, and his artwork is going to be here this evening on display. So from 5 to 8, please come and support your community, because this organization is your organization.
So it starts today.
Right. Thank you all so much.